well. But really, the focus is we'd love to pick Attorney John Veely's brain about the upcoming changes of the H-1B season and get some questions. So before we start, we do have some questions already. John, if you want to give a quick introduction, and then I'll get you started with two questions.
Sure, Pierre. John Veely, lead counsel, Veely Law Firm, Veely Global Law, and Visas.ai and online visas. Bunch of entities there, but we're all about immigration and heading into another H-1B season with the new president, and a lot of questions. Maybe more questions than answers, but some strategies and some ways to look at it. I'm really glad to talk about that today.
Brilliant. Thank you. There is a question from Amit that just came in, and I will read it out loud. But for anyone else that would like to go and actually ask a question, we'll give you a chance right afterwards. The question is terminating H-1B employees. Is it just to inform USCIS, or must you withdraw the LCA too?
Um, you really don't have an absolute duty to do anything, but USCIS is who you inform of that if you desire to. The termination of an employee has an impact, and there are some gray areas about what is termination. Um, and then there is a point that there are 60 days following a termination, as long as the visa doesn't hit its expiration date before then, that would permit an employee to transfer or change their H-1B to another employer.
Very well. Thank you for that explanation. If anyone would like to ask a question, please go ahead and turn on your mic and ask it right away. And as we wait for questions, John, I've seen a lot of webinars that you've done and interviews that you've done this past 2 weeks. What has been the main context of what you've been discussing, really? How much do we know about this year and this administration so far?
So another call was trying to come in, and I hadn't used the system before, or the phone had come in on the system, so you kind of shut down for a second. But what I heard you say is, what are the changes that are going to happen with this administration? Is that right?
That is correct. Yes, like it's too early in a way, but how much do we know so far this year that's different? And is it fair that
Yeah.
people have to be nervous about it, or really can you navigate it with an attorney?
Well, you should be nervous, but you can navigate it with an attorney. The reason we know to be nervous is that last time Trump was president, we got to see that, and there was a stark decrease in approvals. There was an increase in RFEs. There was an increase in just the analysis and inconsistency in the analysis of visa adjudication, right? So we expect that to happen again. Um, we haven't seen much of that yet, but we have seen some things. So what do we know? What has changed? Well, what's changed for sure is a different registration process for H-1Bs, in the fact that it's more expensive this year. So it was $10 to register for the H-1B lottery last year. It's $215 this year. So hopefully that's going to cut down the number of people registering and give people a better chance to register, right? That's going to push out those who are questionable jobs, or they're not sure, an additional job or whatever they might be. They're not going to have that registration. So hopefully go through. Another thing is that it was actually during the Biden administration, but the last 3 days of the Biden administration, that a new H-1B law was passed. It's called the H-1B Modernization Act. And there's a couple of pros and cons in that. The con was that the voluntary investigation um, uh, elements of for the H-1B is now mandatory. So we expect to not only see a continuation of site visits and investigations, but probably an uptick in them, and more of a mean spiritedness in them. We've seen a bit of that. Some examples of that since the Trump administration has taken over is, we've had clients that have been approved for H-1Bs enter in the country, and then immediately there's an investigation to the third party or to the petitioner of whether or not the job is true. They're trying to trick people, or trying to catch people in whatever they said when they filed the visa may be different now. And the unfortunate thing about that is a lot of times these visas take a really long time to get approved, and then they get stuck in the consulates. And by the time the person gets through, it's not exactly the same situation, or it might be a vastly different situation. And that's resulting in some higher level of investigation and some denials. We've seen some very aggressive denials at the border, after people have been approved for H-1Bs, gotten through the consulate, and ended up at airports and then returned right away. So we're seeing a level of aggressiveness that is picking up. So that's what to be ready for. But we've been through it again. One of the things that we're proud of is that, we usually have about a 98 to 99% approval rating across all visas. And when the Trump administration took approvals, of an average of an 88% down to 60%, we're able to maintain a 95%. And that's not just because we're smart or whatever, it's the process, right? So what we do that's a little different than others is we try to identify issues and kind of answer RFEs up front, right? So what's the problem with this case, and can we answer it on the front end? And we do that because we brief, we don't just write cover letters with table of contents. So we try to identify issues and give the answers of how they fit. And as we see new policies start to come out, with this administration, then we will, shape our cases around what's approvable, and probably, try to address what that we think should be approved, but it's not getting approved, or maybe not even file cases that we think don't have much of a shot. So those are the things that attorneys can do differently going into next year. But it's going to be an evolution as we see, this administration start to handle H-1Bs.
Very well. Thank you, John. Has there been any recent policy changes affecting the definition of the specialty occupation? For like the actual specialty occupation, has there been any changes that we know of?
Yeah, the modernization rule, broadened it a little bit. They've added the ability to, have startups hire their own own founders. That was always theoretically okay to do, and we've done some over the years, but they're hard. So there's more clarification in that law that allows that. We've seen that, multiple, um, degrees can be utilized for specialty occupations, instead of a single degree. We think that was a narrow reading. So both of those elements of the modernization law were really just, uh, giving legal, precedent, making a regulation as opposed to a policy on what should be done. So that was the Biden administration probably trying to keep the Trump administration from narrowing too much. Um, well, right now, the specialty occupations, if found in the occupational outlook handbook, that's where they should be. We from time to time see attorneys try to argue ONET as the database. It just doesn't work. I'm not sure why they're still doing that. I guess they just didn't see the change, or maybe some companies are doing without attorneys. But all jobs should be in the OOH, not in ONET. And if you have a job that's not clearly in the OOH, you should try to compare it to one, for sure. And that'd be my advice.
Thank you. Thank you. Has there been any changes to wage requirements or definitions that we also?
Wage,
Yeah.
not yet, not yet, but that would be one that I would likely see happen. Hopefully, it won't be an artificial raise increase. There was discussion about that at the end of the Trump administration, coming up with a number, an arbitrary number that all H-1Bs had to be over. Um, so the most rational thing is to do it the way they're doing it, with, collecting a database of information on what these jobs actually pay, instead of just saying they should pay something else.
That makes sense. Okay, very well. For any questions that are coming in, please send them in the chat so that we can see them. and for those of you watching on YouTube, will also see your questions. John, I'd like to kind of shift into another direction. For anyone watching you that's already working with your firm, what does this mean for them? What's the news that they need to know that's changing?
Sorry, I didn't quite understand the question.
No,
What's
no
the?
problem. So if anyone is watching that's already currently working with your firm and has worked
Yeah.
with your firm for multiple years, does this look like a familiar process to them? How will you navigate the changes basically?
Yeah, for the most part, it's the laws are the same. There's going to be, and really, the Biden administration was doing a lot of investigations as well. They were good on approving visas, but they were really aggressive on revoking visas for elements of fraud. And I think USCIS has overstepped the definition of fraud. I think almost anything they find peculiar or odd, they're lumping it into that. And I'm seeing some investigations where they'll go by an office on a Friday afternoon during a holiday weekend, and if there's nobody there, not enough people there, they're using that to finding a fraud and starting to revoke visas on it. Even if you provide them all sorts of evidence that look, we've made millions of dollars, we got all these projects going, and so I think we got to be ready for those to continue to happen. Those types of situations continue to happen.
Yeah, and also preparing people if they're coming in on their H-1B visa for any questions that
Yeah.
they might receive at the airport, because those
Yeah,
are have increased and gotten uh, a lot more aggressive or persistent. So
that's right, Ashley. Yeah.
Would be
So
looking
one of
for
the things that we're doing more of is litigating. That's the answer sometimes. If we do have a president that is going to outstep the authority that the agency has, then courts are pretty good at shutting that down. That happened in the Trump administration last time. Um, we've seen it today, for example, President Trump said that he's going to replace the EB-5 with the gold card. EB-5 has an $800,000 investment. You get a green card. The gold card is a $5 million investment. Um, President doesn't have that authority to replace it. I mean, these are laws passed by Congress. Congress can. I mean, they could have a bill and it changes, 800 to 500 and changes the name, but that's what that would require, not just a president saying it, not a presidential proclamation. Now, a president can create a program that would do this. DACA was one of those, but presidents can also shut them down. So Obama created DACA and Trump shut DACA down. Obama created the international entrepreneur parole. Trump shut it down. Biden recreated it or kickstarted it. Still exists. Trump hadn't shut that down, but he might. But those are created by presidents. Those are paroles, not visas. So, we got to be looking after that, and we might need to litigate, on some of these issues to protect the rights of our clients.
John, I have two questions. One of them being, when you say litigate, how long does that process look like? I mean, what we think it does is it's years, right? Is it like that in the immigration world as well? It would take
It can
years.
be, but it doesn't have to be. Depends on the issue, right? So, we've had immigration cases where we've filed lawsuits and without even them answering, they've reopened it and approved cases that were, we wouldn't have sued them if they weren't egregious. So they're egregious, and we had them kind of dead to rights. So they did that, and that took about 6 months. But they can go on for years. It's a federal lawsuit. It's a significant thing to do. But sometimes if your company is being attacked and you're not getting your visas approved or anything like that, then you're gonna have to do something as opposed to just sit there and wither and die.
That's true. What additional documentation can a petitioner or their organization basically provide to strengthen the likelihood of no fraud? Do you guys have that?
Yeah, sure. So yeah, more evidence behind the project, right? So if it's an internal project instead of just a project plan, show some screenshots, show some code samples, show some market analysis. If you got clients that are going to beta test it, any of those things would be helpful on, it's just more proof that it really exists would be the answer. But that's butting up against the IT serve case that says you don't need to do some of that stuff. And but I look at it on a case by case basis.
Understood. The last question that I have for us is if there's been any restrictions on third-party placements or staffing agencies on H-1B visas.
Not any more than before, but we expect them to be hitting them hard. And how they get them hard is investigations finding fraud, whether or not there's fraud there, and then informing consulates, hang them up in 221Gs, and then issuing notice of intent to revoke. That's been their modus operandi for a few years now, and we just need to we make sure that the project's real, that the entity is real, that it has an office, that it has a number of employees. I think it should have 5, to kind of keep from under scrutiny and people in those offices. And so, there's a couple of hints that are out there that can help companies, have indicators of reality and indicators of non-fraud through that they're viable companies.
Excellent. A question came in from LinkedIn just now. What happens if my employer fails a USCIS compliance audit? I don't know what that means. Does that ring a bell? What happens?
A USCIS compliance audit?
Yeah, I'm not sure.
I don't know what that means, but I guess USCIS tested him somehow, and I'm not sure what that compliance is, but
and just
doesn't sound like a good thing.
Disclaimer, everything that we're talking here is not legal advice to you or your case. We have immigration attorneys with us, but they're not your immigration attorney. So if you'd like to engage with them, please reach out to the email on the screen and you can book directly a strategy session with them. But none of this is legal advice for your case. We're just giving kind of general questions and answers. I think what this person on LinkedIn might have been asking, John, is if they investigate you and
Right.
the investigation is not in your favor and it's for your employer, are you affected as the worker?
You can be, and we're litigating a case now where an employer was found liable or found, I guess, by USCIS said that they had committed fraud and they revoked the visa for our client when they were at a subsequent place, and we don't think that's fair play. You need to find fraud against the beneficiary too. So those kind of are uphill battle cases, but we're actually suing USCIS for that. So to answer your question, no, I don't think that it should, but but they do hold it against the employees if the employer is found fraudulent, and they do have methods for revoking visas like that. So if that happens, then you got to look at, do you go to court?
Understood. Thank you. This is the last chance for anyone to ask their questions. We have just a few minutes left with Attorney Vili, and then I'll pass the mic really quickly to Attorney Morin. I know that this is technically, your specialty is a mix of different things, but do you have any input on what we're talking about and, all the changes that are happening? Is there any sort of, confidence in this time where everyone is always nervous? What's the positive in it that you see?
Yeah, I think the positive is that if there's less people entering the lottery this year, you're going to have a better chance of being selected and getting that visa. Um,
Yeah.
and we've dealt with a Trump administration before. It's not our favorite thing, but we were able to do it before, and we'll be able to do it this time too.
Well said.
Very well. Awesome. Well, thank you so much.
Audit that they usually do is the public access file.
I see. Yeah.
if they didn't have that on file. And the only time I believe that an audit would be triggered for the employer in that context, not counting a site investigation, would be if a third party complained or they got some sort of credible information from a reliable source, or they have a history of willful violations, or there was some sort of reasonable cause for the investigation. So that would be, something to look into. And yeah, I think it would affect a beneficiary if your employer has as one of those things going on that USCIS is investigating,
Right.
or the DOL,
What does that stand for?
Department of
Department
Labor.
of Labor.
Oh, Department of Labor. Yes, yes.
That's who the LCA is through.
Well, at the end of today's webinar, I want to remind everyone that we are doing these weekly for the next few weeks. So if you'd like to participate and continue being a part of it, please show some interest, and we'll issue invitations to anyone involved. For those of you publicly watching us, you can go ahead and just email this email on screen right now and request an invitation to the H-1B webinar that's happening every Wednesday at 3 p.m. Central, which is 4 p.m. Eastern. And with that being said, one more disclaimer: none of this is legal advice directed to you, towards you. And John, would you like to leave a little plug, if I haven't already, for how we can contact your firm?
Yeah, sure. Look, for employers right now, real good time to set up a strategy session and talk about, your facts. What does your company have? What are you, how are you looking at this? What type of work do you have for your employees? What type of jobs are available for you to file visas for, and what to be wary of. So please, contact us. You can either go to onlinevisas.com and set up a strategy session on there, or go to information@vlilaw.com, and that's the word information at, and then my last name, Velie, VELIE, law, LAW.com. And Ashley, I could have a conversation with you about what to expect and how to be ready for H-1Bs coming forward, and I think it'd be a really good idea.
Excellent. Thank you so much, Attorney John Velie, and thank you, Ashley Morin. We appreciate your time, and we wish you a great rest of the week. And for everyone, again, we'll see you next week at the same time. And with that being said, just really quickly, we have someone saying, can you please display the email ID to get registered? Yes. So the email ID is this one right here. And if you email us on this one or this one and ask for an invitation, you'll be included in the weekly webinar invites. Otherwise, you can just, Diana, you can leave your email in this very chat, and I'll make sure to pass it on to our team. Thank you so much.
Very good.
All right. Bye, guys.
All right. Thanks, everybody.
Thanks.
Next week. Bye. Thanks, Ashley.
Bye.